Good morning, everyone. We'll get started now. So in this morning's session, we're going to have a chat mostly around Microsoft Teams devices and Teams Room devices specifically. So we've got Peter Garner from Microsoft who's joining us. He'll be sort of starting us off with a bit of a discussion about Teams in the context of the current COVID situation. And then I'll be moving into more of a deep dive into the range of Teams devices. We'll do a little bit of demo of a couple of features that are probably relevant to social distancing and COVID. And then towards the end, we'll touch on a few roadmap items as well. We'll have the Q&A open throughout the session. So I've got one of my colleagues, Sam, with me as well. So he'll be monitoring the Q&A. So we might take some of them during the session. Otherwise, we'll try to get the rest of them at the end of the session. So to get us started, please welcome Peter Garner, who's going to start us off.
Morning, everyone. I'm the Teams Room Devices Lead for Microsoft in Australia and New Zealand. I'm really pleased to be joining you today. As we all know, COVID-19 has created enormous challenges for people, for governments, and for organisations, and been hugely disruptive. For many, it's businesses, and for organisations it's been a case of adapt or cease to exist, and technology has been at the heart of many organisations' strategy for connecting with customers, keeping teams collaborating, and in fact to keep their doors open. And next slide please, Nathan. From an interaction perspective, we've transitioned from a large proportion of our work with other people, whether it be teammates, students, patients in a health context, and customers, being in person, to a world of remote everything. Certainly in the months of April and May, the majority of people have been working from home, and their interactions with others have been digital. Whether that's online school or telehealth consults, video calls with customers, or teamwork between co-workers, as a nation, we've been forced into this enormous change. And in the words of Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, we've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in just 2 months. And Microsoft Teams has been at the heart of that digital transformation. And we can see that in the usage numbers here on this slide. So Teams was already Microsoft's fastest growing ever business app, and at its 3-year anniversary in March had grown to 44 million users. And then we had COVID-19, and that jumped to 75 million users, another 31 million people in a little over a month. And that's only up to April 27th. When we see the next sort of official announce of worldwide users, now that we're in June, we expect that to be significantly higher. And Microsoft is working alongside customers every day to help them adapt to the disruption that we're all dealing with, and to stay open for business. And we feel very privileged to make this contribution and to work with partners like Jenny to do it. So over the slide, look at some of the reasons why organisations have been choosing Teams as their platform. It's really boils down to just a couple of things. First, it's about having everything in the one place. Teams is a hub for teamwork, bringing together everything Teams needs, from chat to meetings, video conferencing, PSTN calling, content collaboration in Office 365, and then third-party apps that can be used to integrate into the platform. And then secondly, it comes down to security. Because Teams is part of Office 365, it comes with that enterprise-grade security, compliance, and manageability that our customers expect and value. So then thinking about where we're at in this journey of returning to the new normal of widespread adoption of video technology. In the past couple of months, we've gone through the initial crisis, this sort of left-hand phase, remote everything, adapting and responding. Actually, in Australia, amazing response from organisations and from users in the way that they've embraced technology. And now we find ourselves looking at this sort of next phase, which in many ways is as difficult to navigate as the first was. So, you know, we're talking about another enormous change, workplaces reopening, and then organisations having to prioritise the safety of employees, implement social distancing principles, and deal with the reality of travel being restricted, and what's likely to be a hybrid physical and online workplace. Now, if we think of the time pre-COVID, in most team working interactions, a lot of the team were together in the same place. And if they weren't, then they probably would be very soon. And now we're in a situation where with organizations implementing A team and B team structures, people not being able to travel interstate for different meetings and forums, we could see 50% of the people in the office and 50% still remote for some time to come. And then when we think about what the future looks like, there's a real imperative for organisations to prepare for any eventuality. Australia is doing incredibly well with COVID response right now, but no one knows what the future holds, and organisations need to really future-proof their business so that whatever happens, the platform's in place and the tools are in place so that teams can keep collaborating and can keep getting great outcomes for customers. One, for me at least, silver lining of COVID-19 has been the great way that users have embraced digital technology and video particularly. And so an important job for us all right now is to consolidate that positive change so that we can take that into the years to come as a great benefit to customers and to the work that we do. Next slide, please, Nathan. I show this slide really just to draw your attention to the last couple of bullet points, data points. The 56% was a pre-COVID data point. Bit of research that said that 56% of meetings have at least one remote attendee, and I've jokingly written over the top of that right now that would be much closer to 100%. But then you contrast that to the bottom point, only 15% of meeting rooms are equipped for video, even as video becomes the norm, and you have this situation where people have become used to quite a rich interaction over video over the last month or two. And then as we go back to the workplace, there's going to be all of these audio only meeting experiences where users who are still remote are not going to find themselves included in the meetings and in the team working in the way that they're going to want, that's going to be good for them, and it's going to be good for the organization and the team working outcomes. We've all been in a video call, a conference call where we're audio and the people in the room almost forget that you're there. That would be a terrible outcome if that's what our team working becomes in the months to come. So as we look at Teams and Teams devices on the next slide, it's actually the devices that bring that Microsoft Teams experience to life for users and for teams, whether it be individual workspaces at home or group workspaces in the office. It's the hardware and the deployment that you have in those spaces that creates the rich experience. And with Teams devices, you've got devices that are certified by Microsoft to work well with teams and also to work well together. So you have a consistent and familiar experience for users, intelligent devices giving everyone the opportunity to participate, and reliable systems that can be managed and that are secure. Now, Nathan's going to talk to what that device portfolio looks like and some of the new and upcoming features that you can that'll help you navigate return to the workplace.
Thanks, Peter. So this shows an example of the Teams device portfolio. One of the key concepts that and foundations of Microsoft approach to devices is that Microsoft owns the software and the UI layer of all these devices, in the sense that they do the innovation in the Teams software clients that are run on the Rooms devices as well as the phones. So that means you get a consistent look and feel and familiarity across all of these devices, regardless of which hardware vendor that you choose to use. So it's a key point that I think some people don't realize with these families of devices. Even if you have a mix of different brands, you're going to have a consistent user experience in each room, regardless of which one you choose. So that means you've got flexibility and choice to choose the best of breed of each of these devices to fit your particular needs and application. And certainly we see when we're working with our clients on the different meeting spaces, there's lots of scenarios where one vendor's solution may be a better fit and better form factor for this particular room, but in other rooms it may be another vendor. So one, I guess, point I often make is, while it often seems logical to try to stick with one vendor to standardize things, think of these categories as families of products with a consistent user experience. And don't necessarily assume that you need to stick with one vendor. You do have options to mix these. They're all supported by Microsoft, and they all have the same sort of look and feel and familiarity. So these categories, we're going to dive into the top three mostly in this session, which are the sort of rooms-focused devices and video devices. But touching on the other ones here, we've obviously got the handset or personal phones devices. So they're a range of devices that run Teams client. They're essentially Android-based phones that run, again, the Teams client that's managed and deployed and updated by Microsoft. Similarly, the conference phones is essentially the same platform. Obviously, the hardware is slightly different because it's optimized for group conference calling. And then towards the bottom, we've got a whole range of peripherals, things like headsets and USB speakerphones and other things as well that work with Microsoft Teams to complement them. So they're often, a lot of them are personal devices that you might use at your desk or at your home. But next, we'll start looking at those top three. So Microsoft Teams Rooms, Collaboration Bars, and Surface Hub. These are three distinct categories, and there's differences between them, and they have different use cases that they've been targeted for. So Microsoft Teams Rooms has been around actually for some time. It's had a few different names. One thing to highlight is Microsoft Teams Room, despite the name, actually also works with Skype for Business as well. These originally started as they were called, originally something called Project Rigel, and became Skype Room Systems version 2. They're originally just for Skype, but then as Teams was released, they were updated and the Teams functionality was added, and they changed the name to Microsoft Teams Rooms. But today, if you're still using Skype for Business, these can be deployed to work with Skype for Business and Teams at the same time, so you can join either of those meetings. So there's a few different modes of operations you can use there. Having been around for several years now, this is a very mature sort of category of products as well. There's 6 different hardware manufacturers that are making the core systems of these, plus even more if you look at the peripherals in terms of audio and video devices. So you've got a huge range of options to choose from to customize solutions and adapt them to all sorts of different rooms, everything from a small focus or huddle room right up to an auditorium. There's some features we'll touch on a bit further later on, and some of the upcoming features about joining third-party meetings as well. Now, contrasting that against the collaboration bar, this is a fairly new category. It's only been around for a few months now. There's two vendors have solutions in this category. That's Yealink and Poly. The collaborations bars were really targeted for the smaller focus and small meeting rooms. The platform is slightly different. They're actually Microsoft Teams Rooms was a Windows 10 based platform. Collaboration bars are actually an Android based platform. So they're designed for a lower cost solution for those small spaces, so that you can enable more spaces and do larger rollouts. There's a couple of features, I guess, worth noting that are different in them as well. So the collaboration bars running in that Microsoft Teams mode currently don't support a HDMI input, unlike the Microsoft Teams room. So all the Teams rooms have an HDMI input that you can plug in content. Collaboration bars don't have the physical port, but both of those systems and Hub, they all support joining a meeting and presenting into that meeting by sharing your content from your device that's in the meeting. And that's becoming kind of the new sort of normal way of presenting to meetings. It effectively gives you wireless presentations, so you don't have to physically plug into things as well. And we'll touch more on some of those scenarios as well, because that way of presenting wirelessly and in that manner also means it's much more contactless, so you're not having to touch cables and consoles and stuff in meeting rooms as well. So I'll talk a bit more about that later. The other differences with the collaboration bar, they're currently 720p video, which is still, it's an HD resolution, but it's slightly less than the Microsoft Teams rooms. The way you interact with them is slightly different as well. There's a few different options we'll look at as in the next few slides. Again, I'll talk a bit more to that. Then the last category is the Microsoft Surface Hub. So the Surface Hub is the only first-party Microsoft product that's designed for meeting rooms, essentially, and Microsoft Teams. So its use case, obviously, slightly different again, in that it's an all-in-one device that's designed for the co-creation and interaction and collaboration sort of scenarios. So it's been designed to be a mobile sort of device as well. So most of these end up getting deployed on carts to mobile trolleys today, so you can move them around to different spaces. But again, there is distinct use cases for them. And as we get towards the end, we've got a summary page that gives you some ideas of where you should consider using each of these. So let's dive into Microsoft Teams Rooms a bit further. So these are the 6 hardware vendors that make the core components of these today. The pricing for these sort of solutions with the camera and audio, again, we've got some solutions on our website I'll show you later on, but you can get one of these systems from around $2,200 ex GST. In fact, there's a promotion at the moment. We've got that even cheaper. We'll point out as well if you're wanting to get started with Microsoft Teams Rooms. So again, these are Windows 10 based platform, very flexible with different options of audio and video. I'll take you through some of those now. When you're designing a Microsoft Teams Room solution, there's a few different bits that come part of it. So what we just showed there, those vendors, they make what we call the console and the codec, which is the console is the physical user interface. It's a touch screen that usually is out in the middle of the table, although sometimes you can put it at the side of the room. The codec is essentially that Windows 10 based compute platform. Key thing here is, although it's running Windows 10, it shouldn't be treated like a normal PC, and because it runs at a very specific mode, in a kiosk mode, and is locked down. So with regard to management, you should be considering it to be an appliance. That codec has a content input as well. I mentioned before, each of these has an HDMI input that you can present plug-in content. Sometimes people can put switches or other wireless presentation technology on the end of that content input as well to give you some other input options. Now, to complete the solution, you're going to need a camera and an audio device and a front of room display or display. So you might see actually in the slides there's a abbreviation called FOR, it stands for front of room. So that's the terminology used for the front of room, the main display in the room. There's some optional components that you can add to Microsoft Teams Rooms as well. There's a content camera. Again, we'll show you a bit about that a bit further on in the deck, and an example of what that looks like. But that's specifically for capturing physical whiteboards in meeting rooms. And they also support a front of room touch display, so that you can use that in a whiteboarding mode as well during a meeting. So these are the console and codec components from those 6 hardware manufacturers. The most recent one, so Poly's just announced their new ones last week. So they actually had another product that was there a while ago, but they've just got their new product into this range now as well. So they're the current Microsoft Teams Room solutions in terms of the codec and console. If we move into the cameras, we've got, again, a range of cameras here. So as you're choosing cameras, largely the decisions here are around obviously the form factor of the camera, but the most important thing is the field of view of the camera. So if we're looking at small rooms and focus rooms, you're going to tend to need a camera that has quite a wide field of view, because people tend to be sitting quite close to the camera and to the sides of the camera. So you need cameras with a wide field of view. So cameras like the Hudley in the Crestron, that Crestron uses in their sound bars, the Studio, the Logitech Meetup, these are all designed for their smaller rooms and have a really great wide field of view. Almost all these cameras, or the majority of these cameras on here now, also support intelligent auto framing, and some do even speaker tracking as well. So that means that unlike sort of video conferencing systems in the past, where you have to have a remote control and control the pan, tilt, zoom, get that right, most of these cameras just figure that out for you. It'll detect who's in the room, automatically adjust to fit everyone in the room. And then some can actually track into speakers. And there's a feature we'll show you later on that actually can split the camera as well. I'll demonstrate that a bit later. There's a particular category for content cameras as well. There's a handful of cameras that are certified for that. The main one that we would see used today is probably the Logitech Brio, that's on the top right, and there's some mounts you can get for that. So that camera, because it's designed to point at a whiteboard, it's often going to be mounted on the ceiling, pointed at a whiteboard as well. With the audio options, you know, it's an important thing to understand with audio on any meeting device, but on MTRs in particular, there's 3 bits of the audio to keep in mind when you're designing spaces. There's the microphone, obviously, that picks up your voice in the room, the speakers, so you can hear the far end participants. But the microphone and the speakers, they always have what's called a DSP component, a signal processor. And the key job of that DSP is actually to get rid of the echoes that can be caused in a meeting by the far end audio being picked up by the microphones in the room. And one common mistake we see people make sometimes is that they put in a device, but they configure the room to use one microphone, but then use, say, the speakers in the display, because they want the sound to come from the front of the room. And if you do that in a room, you'll actually end up with having an echo issue. And what's can be tricky about it is you might not notice that, because if you're actually in the room, it's only the people on the far end of the call will hear that. So it's one thing to watch out for. Just make sure that you always have your microphone and your speaker sharing a common DSP. Either they'll be the same device or they will be sharing an external DSP. So the audio devices in the top there, they tend to be the much simpler, straightforward ones to install. They're all USB attached and essentially plug and play those devices. Some of them are integrated with the video camera, so like the Meetup and the Crestron and Poly sound bars. They've got the camera, the microphone, speaker all in one. So really great for deploying into those sort of small, and some of them can do some medium-sized rooms as well. So it simplifies deployment doing it that way. The ones at the bottom, they're what we sort of call some of the more pro audio solutions. So this is what you typically see in your larger rooms and boardrooms. So they feature ceiling microphones that have beam tracking microphones that can pick up the audio in the room at quite a large range, and also they're often deployed with ceiling speakers as well. So it minimizes the technology on the table and clutter on the table. Those solutions, typically, you probably need to get an AV integrator to help you design and implement them, because there's configuration and tuning and stuff that needs to be done for some of those. The ones towards the top, though, again, they're pretty much plug and play. You can go ahead and get those and put them together. They're pretty straightforward to get up and running. So switching across to collaboration bars, I mentioned before, so we currently have Yealink and Poly. Poly's hardware is out. It's actually just the software is going through final testing at the moment. It's currently in the technology adoption preview program. It's expected to be past that and have the official certification within the next couple of weeks. So, but the hardware is available now, and the software will be available for that shortly. These devices essentially are kind of an all-in-one type device. So there's no separate compute for these, like there is with the MTR, the Android and ARM-based computers sort of built into the main device. The microphone and speakers, or for the Poly one, is all integrated in the one physical bar. Yealink has they've separated the audio with theirs, so the camera is in the set-top unit that sits on top of a TV typically. Can be mounted upside down as well, but their audio has that speakerphone that you can put out to the table, and it comes with a 5-meter cable that you can put out to the table. Whereas Poly, everything is all in the sound bar, and there's 2 different sizes of theirs as well, the X30 and X50 to suit different size rooms. In regard to pricing, you see that the entry price for these is a bit lower than the MTRs. Again, they're designed for the smaller rooms for larger scale deployments. And there is a promotional price on Yealink has a promotion at the moment for their device that we've got available on the website as well. I mentioned before, so Poly's got the 2 sizes. So essentially look the same, one's bigger, and the camera and optics and obviously audio performance are slightly different in each to suit different size rooms. There's a few different ways to control the collaboration bars. So they were always designed so that you could actually use the front of room display if it was touch enabled to control the room. So if you have a small room where you can actually, where the participants in the room could actually reach the display and touch the front of room screen, you can actually use the device and join meetings and interact with the device by just touching the touch screen itself. So that's one way of doing it. Poly has another couple of methods. So they've got a small separate touchscreen console that you can control it from. And you can also pair it with the Poly Trios as well, so which has a 5-inch screen on there. So that screen becomes the control for the studio. So the X Series is a great sort of transition device if you are using Poly Trios today, perhaps for Skype for Business, and you want to transition them into a solution that works with video and Teams. Adding a Studio X Series is a good way to do that. You could still use your Trio for the audio at the table, and you use it for the control. Your camera and the processing will be all done in the X Series. So it's a good step up to video and Teams. The Yealink one has 2 options for control. So again, they've got that front of room touch, so you can interact by touching the buttons on the front of room screen, but it also comes with a small remote control as well that you can use to navigate that. In fact, the speaker phone that it comes with as well also has some buttons on there. So when you do a scheduled meeting, there's a single button you can just push either on the speaker phone or on the remote just to join the meeting. So typically you don't need to push many buttons at all. But both of those have got, again, a wide field of view suitable for those small rooms. The Surface Hub, again, this one's more optimized for those collaboration scenarios and co-creating content. You might be whiteboarding or reviewing a document together with other people. You can have people both in the room looking at the device, but obviously remotely as well. And it has a sort of best-in-class sort of, whiteboard and touch experience. So these are currently available in the 50-inch display. There is an 85-inch version coming later this calendar year as well. There is a battery pack that can be deployed with these that sits underneath that shelf that you can see on the trolley. I think they're not quite shipping yet. They've been delayed a little bit, but I think they're due within the next month or so. Should be available. So you can deploy the battery pack. That means that you can unplug this from the wall and move it around the office while it's still running. You can run a whole meeting while it's unplugged if you need to. But it just enhances that mobility aspect of the Surface Hub, so you can move it to more places and get more use out of it. When we are thinking about designing spaces, we developed this meeting room design philosophy that is really based on making sure that people can be productive in less than 60 seconds. And still today, we see a lot of people experience meetings and that when they go in there, it can take 5, 10, up to 15 minutes to figure out the technology and get it connected to the meeting, right? So we took that as a kind of a key objective to solve in our design philosophy. And it seems simple to solve it, which is just keep things simple and intuitive, but it actually takes a bit of thought to get that done right. So we sort of break that down into a few key concepts of things, guiding principles essentially that you should use when you're designing a space. The first and probably the most important one is if you want to keep it simple, then don't try to do everything in one room. So you need to minimize those use cases. If you're trying to have 5 different inputs in different places in the room and different devices that you can switch in, it's inherently going to be complicated, and you're inherently going to need many more controls, and it's going to be confusing for people. So we often challenge our clients to really distill down to the core use cases and focus on those. Again, that leads to minimizing the controls, so we should have very few controls, and just the operation of the device should be intuitive. The solutions we have today all essentially support zero-touch presentations, or MTR. If you do just plug into the cable, you don't need to push any buttons at all. The content will just come onto the screen. Even if it's not even a VC space, the displays that you can use these days should automatically wake up and as soon as they get a signal. So you shouldn't need to have any remote controls just to present in a room. One-touch meeting join is the norm as well. So if you schedule a meeting, you should be able to go into a room and do a one-touch join, or potentially no touch, at least on the device. Again, we'll touch a bit more on the proximity join scenarios later. Last couple of ones there is avoiding room PCs. Putting a PC with the keyboard and mouse in a room has been a way to solve some of the challenges in the past, but it creates a lot more other problems that drag down that experience. So they should be avoided if you can. Also, avoiding projectors. Again, they are an economical way to get a large display, but they also slow down the media experience and have other issues with having to control the light as well. The other thing that we like to remind people is when you're thinking about a meeting experience, it's much more than just about the technology that's in the room. So the key elements you need to consider is your platform. So in this case, we're talking about Microsoft Teams. You also need to be looking at your network to make sure that you've got the right network design and capacity. Even things like power over Ethernet capacity on your network switches these days is particularly important. A lot of devices are PoE powered. And then you've got all the room aspects as well. So you need to be thinking about all those three things at the same time. If you get all those three things aligned and optimized for each space, then you can get a greater meeting experience. But unless you're driving adoption and have a strong change management practice to go along with that, you may not necessarily get to success. Because if you've got great media experiences that no one uses and no one knows how to use, then I would suggest it's probably not necessarily a successful project. So we're going to look at a couple of aspects of how COVID-19 has affected meetings. As Peter touched on before, the expectation and demand for video conferencing and collaboration has increased, and nearly everyone's been forced into doing regular online meetings and video conferencing. And if you're working on a project or an initiative and you need to be sharing information and collaborating, it's not just the video and audio you need to be able to share documents and maybe whiteboard and do other things as well, right? So we need to be thinking about the broader collaboration capabilities that we can enable people to do regardless of where they are. There's been obviously very much a rethink of the physical offices and meeting space layouts with many meeting rooms today because of the social distancing rules that we'll have as people come back to the office. You're going to need to change the capacity of your meeting rooms. That will typically mean you're going to maybe take some chairs out or advise people that these meeting rooms can only suit a smaller number of people in them than what they're originally designed for. The other thing, again, we talked about, I mentioned before, this we've got a lot of clients that are talking to us about how they can try to make their office more contactless. So if we think about scenarios of how to join meetings and do things throughout the office, we're looking for ways that we can avoid having to touch screens that need to be cleaned regularly and things as well. So it sort of relates to the cleaning discussion. There's also very much a reduction in travel, again, Peter said. So as people come into the office, many people need to travel for meetings in the past. So we're going to see much more that people are going to be using video conferencing instead of travel. So again, they could do that from the desktop, which they're doing today. But I think there's going to be, we'll probably expect an increased demand in video devices in meeting rooms as well. And to support all of that, if you're going to be needing more video devices, you need approaches that you can use to get these devices out to people quickly. as well. So having low touch and rapid deployment solutions will be important. So some of the features we want to call out that I guess particularly relevant with regard to collaboration. Microsoft Whiteboard is available across all those meeting devices. So Surface Hub, it's a key, and one of the primary use cases of Surface Hub is using the whiteboard. The whiteboard works natively in Microsoft Teams as well at the desktop. Whiteboard's available in the Microsoft Teams room and a collaboration bar. So again, with the Teams room and collaboration bar, if someone shares a whiteboard, you'll be able to see it. But if your front of room display is touch as well, you can also interact with that whiteboard. Now with the Microsoft Teams room, they have the content camera as well. So this camera, as you can see in that the animation there, essentially what it does is in the room you design it so it's pointing at a traditional dry erase whiteboard, and it's taking snapshots of that whiteboard and turning that into a digital ink and presenting that back into the meeting as a digital whiteboard. And because of the way it works, you see that if anyone actually steps in front of it, it actually looks like they're transparent because it's taking snapshots of the image in the background. So it has a pretty cool effects there, and often called the magic whiteboard feature. Proximity join is an interesting one. This is something you can do now with Microsoft Teams rooms, and you can join with collaboration bars as well. The way proximity join works is that when you're about to join a Microsoft Teams meeting, either on a mobile device or on your desktop client, as you go to hit the join button, you get a page that's sort of a pre-join page. When you hit join, you don't go straight in. You have an option to see your video and turn your camera on and off and check your audio and stuff. So on that page, if you are in a room that detects a collaboration bar or a Microsoft Teams room via Bluetooth, it will offer for you to join the room into the meeting as the audio video device instead. So the way it works, you walk into a room with a laptop, I hit the join button on my laptop. It offers me to join from the room device. I click on that, and that before what would happen is that device would ring and you would hit answer on that. Now in the latest update for MTR that maybe not everyone's got yet, but it's been rolling out. There is actually an auto answer feature for proximity join. So if it detects your proximity to the device via Bluetooth and you do that feature and you have the auto answer feature on as well, it will also answer the call. So that means you can walk into a room and join the meeting, have your meeting, and leave the room, and the device will automatically disconnect from the call without ever having to touch the console. So again, it's one of those sort of contactless scenarios that might be quite useful. So you can do that again both from the PC and mobile app. I put up on here, there's the settings that you need to set for that. So you do need to be enabling the Bluetooth proximity join, and there's a setting. There's two different settings there, one for the automatically answer and one for the automatically leave the meeting when it's finished. The way the leave works in the latest update is once there's no one else in the meeting, it will wait 5 minutes and then you'll get a notification on the device saying it's about to leave. You can sort of snooze that warning and then leave it in the meeting if you need to, but it takes about 5 minutes for it to leave. Another important thing is making sure that people can get into your meetings. So if you're using Teams meetings and you're inviting external parties into that, Cloud Video Interop is a service that you can add that allows third-party systems like traditional H323 and SIP-based video systems to get into your meetings as well. So if you're giving lots of meetings with third parties and you're sending them invites, this can be a good solution to add. The other scenario that it's often used for is if you have a legacy fleet of devices, whether they might be Cisco Life-Size or older Polycom H323 or SIP devices that don't natively work with Teams, you can use Cloud Video Interop to get those devices to work in Teams and get them with video and content sharing. And in many cases, you can also have them give them a one-touch join experience as well. Currently as well, there's a workaround we can do to actually dial into a Zoom, BlueJeans, or WebEx meeting from an MTR. Now, I'll touch on a new feature that's coming up. Will be released soon that will make this even easier. But some people weren't aware of that there is actually a way to do this. It's effectively using Zoom or BlueJeans or WebEx. It's using their interop platform. Essentially, it's making a Skype for Business call to it. So I've got the instructions on this slide, which we can share later on. But how it works is you dial those addresses, and then you'll be prompted for the conference ID, and you can actually get into those meetings from Microsoft Teams rooms. There's a couple of caveats down there at the bottom, in that the MTR must be running via Skype mode, which actually is pretty much always there at the moment anyway, because you can't really turn it off. The Teams meeting, Zoom meetings, the person who's invited you to that meeting must be on one of the paid plans as well, so that they've got the interop. And then BlueJeans, I think there's a particular subscription as well you need. So there is actually a way to do it, so you can try that out if you need to get into those meetings. But again, I'll touch on something coming up very soon that will make that even easier later. Another thing we've seen a big increase in is Teams live events. So this session we're doing is a live event, which is great. So lots of people are using this to communicate with their staff and also external parties. Now, while that's been happening and that increase in usage has been happening while people are at home. So Teams live event, the way that works is your media goes to Microsoft Azure, and then everyone who's connecting downloads that video stream from wherever they are. When people are at home, they're all coming from their individual internet connections at home. One thing to be aware of is if you continued using live events in the same way for your internal staff and they start joining back from the office again, you can have this issue where you've all of a sudden got heaps of people in the office connecting to a live event, and you're downloading many video streams, and you can very quickly overwhelm your internet or WAN bandwidth. So just one thing to be watching out for as you start to transition back into the office, and if you're using live events for things like company meetings. So there is a way to solve this, and it's called an Enterprise Content Delivery Network, or ECDN. So Collective is a partner we work with in Australia. So they have a solution that essentially uses peer-to-peer technology, so that when someone within a corporate network starts watching the stream, their stream can be shared to others without everyone having to pull it down the same stream from the internet. So it solves that problem. With regard to getting deployments deployed rapidly, we've been working on some solutions to make this quicker and easier. These AV or VC credenzas and carts are a way that we can pre-configure and pre-assemble a lot of the components required to be deployed, and get those deployed out to sites more rapidly. So it's just easing the installation. It means that we can do a lot of the build work in a build staging area, and then get them sent out to sites. Sites mostly pre-configured. So with that credenza, that unit there is showing with the cover off, but all those the electronic devices in there are pre-assembled and connected. You just need to basically plug in your power and data and hook it up to the display and hang it on the wall, and away you go. And then with the carts as well, there's modules in there. We can pre-assemble a lot of the components and get them deployed. I'm going to switch across now. I'm going to do a quick demo, a couple of features I want to show you. The first one will be the camera on the Poly Studio. So I'm going to switch my mic across to that. Okay, so now we are running on a Poly Studio camera that features some tracking technology. So as I'm speaking, you'll notice that the camera's zoomed into me, but I've also got Sam in the room, and he's a socially distant 1.5 meters away.
Maintaining social distancing, and as I am speaking, the camera will move on to me.
Okay, but then as I start speaking again, the camera will switch to me, and because it's detected there's actually two people in the room and we're not quite close to each other to get one view, you'll see the camera switch to what we call a conversation mode. So it's actually split the camera view and showing two people in the room with a sort of close-up view of them. And then it's to switch back to me now because Sam stopped speaking. But that we thought we'd show you is probably a relevant feature if you either have Poly Studios today that can be enabled. But in a room like this, if you're enforcing social distancing, then you need to make sure you don't have necessarily the same number of people. But it's a way that we can maintain a great video experience while doing that. So just bear with me a second as I go switch my audio back. All right, and we'll switch back to the slide deck. Last couple of things I'll show you. Just get out of that deck. So logging into the admin center. I just wanted to show you quickly with the meeting devices. There is an admin center in Teams that lets you manage devices. So currently today you can manage the phones and the collaboration bars. So in here you can see the status of your devices. You can do initiate remote restarts. You can do push updates to them. You can create configuration profiles, see the health. You can add asset tags and things like that. So some great management tools in there for phones and collaboration bars. There'll be a new category added very soon for the Microsoft Teams room devices as well. So that's currently in testing and should be rolling out very soon. I mentioned Collective before. The Collective website has a great demo tool and a trial offer. If you want to try out, it actually you can demonstrate how the ECDM works through the web browser by simulating multiple sessions. So check out Collective if you're doing lots of live events and planning a transition back to the office and want to plan for those bandwidth implications. Our Generation E Express website, so express.generatione.com.au, has a whole range of Microsoft Teams devices on here. So we've got all the different categories here. There's a couple of promotions that are available at the moment. So one, thanks to HP and Yealink, they've done a great promotion that we have a Teams room solution, including the camera and audio, and the codec and console for under $2,000. So that's available there. So if you're looking for a way to get started and try these out, that's probably a great one to check out. Another thing that we've just added is a configurator, so you can essentially customize your own room as well. So we'll keep adding to this, but at the moment you've got most of the codec and console options. So you can choose the codec and console option. You can choose a camera and audio solution. You can even add a display for that if you want as well. And as you do that, you'll see the price of that solution sort of as it adds up and choose your amount. So if you're happy with that, you can go ahead and order these. Or if you're planning a project as well and you're just sort of shopping around, you can add these to a quote request. So that will go to our inside sales team and they can work with you to get some volume pricing these as well. So this site we sort of created to make it easier for our customers to find information about devices, but also make it easier just to purchase those ones and twos that you need as occasionally as well. So we see a lot of activity in the headsets and handsets today, but also we want to make it also available to get into the room devices as well. So we group them by a category of devices, but also room type. And lastly, I won't actually go into the demo of it, we're running short of time, but Microsoft has a managed meeting room program as well where they offer an admin portal and support service to provide support around room devices as well. So if you want to check that out, go to rooms.microsoft.com and you can see that there as well. So let's switch back to deck. So starting to wrap up, this is the roadmap for the Microsoft Teams Rooms devices. So there's a couple of things here just calling out that is already available today. Key one there is that proximity meeting join that's already available today. You've obviously got a range of devices you can use. Intelligent capture for whiteboard, so we can do that whiteboard camera as well. Recently, they added support for modern authentication as well, so that's an important one for security. But coming up in the next half, and some of these will be quite soon, but the direct guest join for WebEx and Zoom meetings, coordinated meeting join, which means that you can have a Surface Hub and an MTR in a room, and they're paired in a way that if you join either to a meeting, the other will join without the audio on, so you don't have this sort of echo issue. And there's also additional front of room video layouts coming. So the Teams client now has 3x3 video layouts. The video, the room devices are still the 2x2 currently, but they are going to add those additional video layouts to the room devices as well. Automatic exit of the meeting with proximity join as well is, so it actually is in one of the latest releases of the MTR, but there's some more functionality coming as well. The direct guest join that's coming soon, that will allow you to natively connect to Zoom and WebEx meetings directly from the Microsoft Teams Room console. So it'll be able to detect an invitation from a Zoom meeting or a WebEx meeting and give you a one-touch join experience, so that if you're deploying Microsoft Teams rooms into your rooms, you'll also be able to seamlessly join Zoom and WebEx. So there's been a slight delay on the Zoom one, but so it's expected now that the WebEx functionality will come out first. That should be out pretty soon, and then followed by Zoom a bit later in the year. And I mentioned before, coordinated join. So again, that's a scenario of joining a Surface Hub and an MTR in the same room, so that you can use the hub as a whiteboard and a content and collaboration device, while also having the MTR video experience in the room. And to finish up, this is a table that just outlines again how to think about some of those devices and what sort of spaces they're suitable for. So it's grouped into two types of scenarios. The first being meet and present, which is your typical use case for a meeting room, in that you want to be able to display some content in a room, but also be able to join online meetings with audio and video as well. And then the meet and co-create are the more collaborative scenarios, typically where you would use a Surface Hub. So I won't go through those in detail, but that's available there to think about how you can start playing those spaces. So I think we're probably slightly over time. I'll check with Sam. We've got a couple of questions? Yep.
Okay. The first question is for Peter. Peter, are you there?
I am.
Okay. The first question is, are you seeing companies migrate traditional file systems content into Teams? And would you recommend that?
Traditional, sorry, Sam, I just I missed the first part of the question.
Are you seeing companies migrating traditional file systems, so Windows Explorer to content to Teams?
I think they mean, yeah, which are we moving from file shares to SharePoint, which is essentially what's underlying in Teams. So that's probably a more information management session. Well, I can take that if you like, Peter, but
yeah.
Yes, we see it. Again, it's probably less of a rooms devices thing, but yes. Yeah, we went through that transition ourselves a while ago now, but certainly that is a pretty important thing to be thinking about if you haven't already done that these days, because if you're still running file shares for people, that's going to mean you either need VPNs or remote desktops and things for people to get to those files. So thinking about information and collaboration and document sharing in a modern sense, in a cloud-first mobile sense, is absolutely critical these days. Otherwise, you're really putting barriers in for people to be able to collaborate and share information. So yeah, we've been seeing that for a long time. And so if you haven't already done it, yeah, suggest it's something that should be very important to get onto these days.
Well said,
Thanks.
Nathan.
Thanks, Nathan. Okay, one last question. When will it be possible to show two presenter videos side by side in a Teams live event, as well as the content?
That is a good question, because to be honest, I didn't realize that you couldn't do two video presenters for this one. We were planning it until we were testing it. I showed you a workaround before on how you could do it, and then in that Sam and I were physically in the same room, obviously, so it's not quite the same thing. But when we were planning this, again, Peter's at home in Sydney, and we've come into our Richmond office. The answer, I guess I don't know when you can have multiple videos. The other way, there is a way you can do it with encoders, but effectively you can only have one encoder going into the Microsoft live event, which means that encoder is going to have to be able to get those streams, which you could bring in by other means, but it'd be getting really complicated. So short answer is I don't know. It's a good question though.
Yeah, I was reading about this and some internal information. I have a feeling that it is very close, but no official word on that.
Yeah, so I guess to that point, obviously Microsoft has realized even more the value of things like live events, and they've got a big rush of feedback of all these various scenarios that might not have thought about before. So I suspect features like that will be rapidly added to roadmaps.
Yeah, when you read what's new in Teams for March and what's new in Teams for April and what's new in Teams for May, the speed at which new features are being rolled out is just it's incredible. I think the security platform is there and solid, so you know, a lot of the engineering work is on feature enhancement right now. So what I've observed is that if ever I think it would be great if we had this particular feature, then it generally is along in no time.
Okay. All right, I think we're all done for questions. Thanks everyone for attending. We will send out a notification to everyone that's registered with a link to the deck as well if you're interested in any of that. But thanks again.